Welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. Joining us today is Nate Edgerly, CEO of Enzo Group Inc., an investment firm with a private equity lens investing in the hospitality industry. Nate, if you can give us a brief insight into you, please.
Sure, yeah. So I've had a multi-decade long career working with private investment companies. I'm a CPA by training. And I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers back in the early 2000s when private equity and hedge funds were really starting to take hold and proliferate. Um, I found those clients were awesome to work with, and I quickly concluded that I wanted to be on that side of the table. I enjoyed the transactional work. I enjoyed looking at different businesses and business models. So I joined with a private equity group based in Raleigh, called Moorhead Capital, where I was the COO and CFO for about 6 years. And over the life of that fund, very successful experience, awesome experience working with private companies. We were focused primarily on hospitality in that fund. And then we merged with our largest investor, and the team from Moorhead took over leadership of the large kind of holding company that had a diversified portfolio of companies. And that was a very large enterprise. We went from being, middle market, lower middle market to like large private equity style businesses. So I had a lot of experience working with a variety of different businesses, and I loved working with executives. And I had the opportunity when I was there to get involved with a lot of the businesses in leadership roles. So I actually served as chief executive for one of the businesses for a turnaround situation, which was an awesome experience. I learned a ton about, what it actually means to run a business, which I think has given me a lot of insight into the challenges that, executives face in true operating businesses on a day-to-day basis. We navigated a lot of crises like COVID. That was a heck of an experience. So anyways, I've learned a ton through that process, and I've really enjoyed working with people. I think of myself as much as of an operator as I do an investor. And I think, one of the things I really enjoy is connecting with executives to sort of uh, understand their challenges and opportunities and help them navigate, what are often very difficult circumstances. So anyways, that's a brief history of my time in the industry. And so, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
What did you learn from the running of a business that you now leverage as an investor?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's huge. Like my ability to relate to CEOs and leadership teams and what they have to do in a business and grow a business is so much better than what it was before. I took a lot of things for granted. Um, and as an investor, I mean, I kind of knew, kind of theoretically and intellectually that leadership was really important, and strategy development and execution and those sorts of things were critical. And I knew you wanted to have the best executive you could possibly have, and on that team, you know. But now I really feel like I understand what it takes to be a really good leader of a business, and I can relate to those people a lot better. I can empathize with them. I can understand their challenges, and I can help solve problems much, much more effectively than I could when I was young and kind of ignorant. So, um, I've had the good fortune to work with some outstanding CEOs in my career. Um, and, it's hard not to learn from that kind of talent. And that's the advantage that it's given me. Um, I think I'm a better partner to business leaders and founders, especially, understanding their challenges. So,
What is it you said you've worked with some fantastic CEOs. What is it that those CEOs did that made them exceptional, fantastic, whatever buzzword we want to put on top of it?
yeah, it all comes down to people, um, and how they relate to people and how they support people. Um, that's probably the deepest insight I've had into leadership of an organization, that executive leadership is really about service to others. And first and foremost, the coworkers in the business, so that, you support them and create an environment for them where they can thrive and excel and have a great experience. And that drives great results with customers. It's if you can train people, support people, um, empower them, they'll surprise you with what they can accomplish. And a lot of people talk about culture, and leadership establishes culture and values, and it's really true. It's one of the most important things I've seen in business. And the great leaders are incredibly empathic, service minded, and support their people.
What's one of the mistakes that you see either private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what would you suggest to correct them?
Yeah, so private equity. I have deep respect for private equity. I mean, it's part of my DNA, and um, you know, traditional private equity is designed, engineered, tooled to do some very specific things. And everything from the metrics that are applied to traditional private equity, IRR based metrics, um, and the short-term hold periods, relatively short-term hold periods,
Mhm.
are designed to achieve a very specific outcome. And Uh, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, because they're good at what they do, and they drive financial results for kind of passive, alternative investment investors. Um, but philosophically, what I've learned over the years is the businesses that I personally enjoy working with, and the best financial outcomes are derived from a long-term perspective, and not a short-term earnings rally and a lot of financial engineering. Many of those things are cyclical, and that's why you have private equity has vintage funds, right? Like there's the fund one, fund two, and they're associated with particular years, and the performance of those funds is highly correlated with the economic cycles and the capital flows that occur during those windows. So they're subject to the vicissitudes of the marketplace, in contrast with something that has a longer term perspective and kind of not a situation that's not a forced sale situation. Um, Business leaders are able to make good long term investments in the business, which can build a stronger, less risky business that's more profitable over the long run. And my experience has been that the best time to sell a company, I never like a forced sale that's timeline driven. That's you know, you can only achieve a certain desired result in the context of a forced transaction. Um, I really like to wait for when the market and the capital washes through a particular industry or business model, and Mr. Market, to borrow from Buffett, presents an irrational valuation. And that's the point at which you sit down with your partners and you say, hey, maybe now is the right time to sell this business. And if you're opportunistic, if you aren't hemmed in by a particular time frame, and you have the ability to be opportunistic, I think you generate much better results over the long term, and you can have a much stronger, more profitable, durable business, with oftentimes much happier leadership and a stronger culture in the business, which I think is a real strategic asset. I mean, I'm one of those believers in culture as strategy, and I think it's a differentiator. And private equity doesn't really have an opportunity to invest in culture. They bring strong transactional leaders into the fold, and those are incredibly valuable executives, but they know what they're there to do, right? They're there for a short period of time, and they need to get really big time results in that window, and they're gonna, take the steps necessary, whether they're the right, long-term steps, you know, is really less of a concern. So, um, yeah. So for that reason, I'm biased to structures that afford us the flexibility, investors the flexibility to manage those different variables more effectively.
So I suppose then there's all sorts of different elements that will come that will be benefits and drawbacks of that. One of which is your I'd like to dive into the kind of capital raise process. If you go on your website, it's not typical from a private equity firm. There's lots of cool opportunities to raise capital, but this time targeted on individual investors rather than institutional. Um, is the leading factor because of the need for longer term hold periods, or what is it that made you choose that method?
Yeah, it was a couple of things. Definitely. So we chose a structure that would give us the flexibility to build a family of businesses for the long run. And that's, we have a lot of different options for how we want to ultimately monetize those investments. It could turn out that it becomes a really strong portfolio of companies that's greater than the sum of its parts, and that company as a holding company is actually the right vehicle to do something like a public offering, or uh, you know, there are a bunch of different options. I could go through a long list of different options, but it gives us a lot of flexibility to do the right thing, build the right culture, make the right types of partnerships um, over time. And importantly, historically, alternative investments have been in private equity, hedge funds, what have you, have been the domain of an exclusive network of kind of, people who are in the know, right? If you've got your wealth management at Morgan Stanley, they're going to bring opportunities to you, or, Goldman Sachs or whatever. You have to have a certain net worth, that's oftentimes in, 8 digits or more. Um, you know, one of our goals is, we have those relationships and we're going to leverage those relationships to raise capital. But, philosophically, we really like the idea of democratizing a little bit, the access to the sort of expertise and private markets investing that traditionally has been reserved for, you know, kind of ultra high net worth, I'd call it, investors. And so, you know, that's a big motivation for us. Like I would love to create an investment vehicle that gives my mom and people like my mom and, you know, who aren't sophisticated, high net worth people access to what we do well. And, um, so that gives us a meaningful sense of purpose. So,
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick mention of a long-standing partnership with Grata. As you will probably know, the private equity scene is constantly evolving, and deal flow is moving now to proprietary and data-driven processes. Grata provides you with the data and information of over 7 million private companies. So if you're looking to improve your proprietary deal flow and improve the data access, then reach out to Grata today. Now back to the podcast. You guys chose the hospitality industry, which in my eyes is renowned for everything like restaurants and obviously other areas. But I know you've got a big background in restaurants, lots of turnover, lots of kind of boom and bust, experience related changes. What made you choose such what appears to me to be such a volatile industry?
yeah. So, um, I have, like I mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity to work with some really awesome brands. Um, and I've seen what they do well, and I've really come to understand the critical success factors for those businesses. The reputation that the hospitality and specifically restaurant industries have um, is largely a function of the accessibility of those of that industry, right?
Mhm.
You get a lot of people starting businesses. It's very easy to start a restaurant. It's very hard to scale and operate a restaurant company profitably. That takes a very different skill set from being able to cook and make people happy when they come in the four walls of the restaurant. Small restaurant businesses encounter a lot of challenges and risks that larger restaurant businesses don't. It's some of its portfolio effect, idiosyncratic risks are more dangerous to small businesses, single unit operators, stuff like that. So that's what really drives a lot of the statistics that you hear about. Oh, it's a high failure rate, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but going back to the original idea, with my experience with this industry, I believe, I hope, I think I have really come to understand what differentiates great from good or adequate or mediocre. And I understand how to scale restaurant businesses. It's not easy because they don't have a lot of extra profit to invest in overhead and building out, an enormous team, to just blow out and build a ton of units all over the place. It takes a very careful, deliberate growth strategy that's appropriate for that particular brand to execute sensible growth. And the biggest issue that I see with growing restaurant businesses is they their appetite for growth gets ahead of their ability to manage people. You mentioned turnover. That is a huge problem in the restaurant industry. I mean, it's very common to see over 100% turnover, in the front lines of a restaurant business. Um, One of the core areas of investment that I encourage uh, hospitality and restaurant businesses to make is in the people, systems, and processes. How do you support your people? How do you train your people? How do you give them the tools they need to execute their job well, earn well, and support the customer experience? If you can figure out that piece of equation and you lead with that in growth, it massively de-risks restaurant growth. And but so many restaurant businesses, they go out and they want to take down a bunch of real estate and they want to build units and they have expertise in these sorts of areas. They want to diversify geography. They want to, and those are all great goals, but they aren't investing in the people piece of the equation, and you can't get ahead of the people piece of the equation. That's the bottom line. So, um, hopefully that answers the question. I could talk about restaurant business, indefinitely. I love the business. It's near and dear to my heart because it is so accessible and the opportunities for upward mobility are huge. You can go from working in a dish room, and if you have a good work ethic and a good judgment, good head on your shoulders, you can eventually operate your own unit or transition to corporate or in a franchise system, even become an entrepreneur and earn just a tremendous living doing that. And the restaurant business affords people that opportunity. And I view that as kind of like one of the core objectives of a restaurant business is to create that type of opportunity because it supports growth. If you can do that, the growth will come provided you have a viable concept. So,
The reminds me of a book actually, Unreasonable Hospitality, which I'm going to guess
oh yeah.
you read being in your industry. 11 Madison Park,
All right.
and what I've done with my executive search business is look outside of executive search because you just end up getting stuck doing what your competition does, what XYZ does, and just end up being similar. How many firms have tried to copy the McKinsey and the BCG way of consulting, and we've looked at those type of businesses. We've looked at hospitality businesses, but that was a big advocate for me of really understanding customer service, customer experience, and how to go further. What are some of the restaurant brands that you admire? and why you mentioned that people element, but what specifically makes you admire them and why you think they've been around and successful for so long?
Yeah, so before I at some point I'd like to circle back to executive search. I've worked with a lot of executive search firms and I first of all, I love Will Guidara and Unreasonable Hospitality. It's a fantastic book. It's a fun read and he's a great thinker about service leadership
Mhm.
and the customer experience. Um I actually recommend that book to a lot of restaurant companies that I get involved with, like to help them understand what's possible, and sort of team leadership and stuff like that. So great book, and it's applicable to so many different industries. Um, Restaurant companies I admire, I like a lot of different concepts for different reasons. Some of them are small, concepts, that are doing some things very different that I think are, um, very, kinda next generation of hospitality. There's a concept in, Nashville called Ladybird Taco that I think is, doing some awesome stuff with people, and, relating to multiple generations of customers in a really effective way with a sense of humor and empathy, and it's just a very warm and inviting uh, concept. I have huge respect for the original Chop Shop. The leadership there is really seems to understand how to scale a restaurant business. Um, I love Cava. I've always loved Cava. I knew Cava when they had 5 units in Washington D.C. Um, and I've admired that brand for going on a decade now. They're delivering an awesome, high quality food experience in a very accessible way. Um, and I think they're doing something, bringing something really new to culinary in the fast casual context. I respect a lot of larger restaurant chains for what they do well. I mean, McDonald's, I think, is an awesome business. I think the longevity they've had. I mean, they clearly understand how to execute their business model. And, so many people have started their careers at McDonald's. I mean, it's really like i- i- you know, they've created opportunity for so many people. I mean, I really admire what they've done.